I hope you all can see me. Good evening. How's everybody doing? I'm hot. I'm really hot because Facebook tried it. It really tried it. If you can hear me and you can see me, please put in the comments that you can. I'm really hot because Facebook tried it. It really tried it. If you can hear me and you can see me, please put in the comments that you can. I'm really hot because. All right. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Can you see me? I want to make sure that I'm not dark on the screen. Okay? Let me know if you can see me, because I'm looking at two screens right now. I'm looking at the Zoom, and I am looking at Facebook. All right. I had a ring light. The ring light didn't work the way I needed to. And then I tried to put my phone up to be the flashlight, but then I need to be able to see what is going on, how to answer your questions. And then I tried to stream through YouTube. YouTube was acting funny. So I canceled that ass. And then I get on Facebook, and then Facebook has the audacity to tell me that after almost a decade of membership, they can't find my ID. Even though I am logged on another interface, they can't find my ID that is necessary for me to log on to go live. So let me tell you, I'm gonna keep it moving, okay? What I am going to do is I am going to just talk through the Zoom, and there is a delay, and it is going to come on Facebook. I will have to come back to Facebook to answer questions or any comments, but I am so glad to see everybody. So I am just going to talk almost blind, meaning I won't be able to see how I look on Facebook, but you'll see the difference once I use this flashlight. Okay, hold on a moment. Now I'm hoping that looks better. Okay, this is my little way of trying to make things work. Okay, there are a lot of statements and quotes that says sometimes, you know, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And I stay ready in terms of information, but in terms of getting ready with technology, there's so much that goes on, and that is not my area of expertise. However, I am going to do it. I'm going to say what is on my mind because I feel that the Spirit is leading me, as well as the ancestors have my back. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing is, please, please, please share this with your family, with your friends. You can share this on any social media platform. I am going to upload this video onto YouTube so that those who do not have Facebook can watch YouTube later. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I want to thank you all so much for those who have subscribed. So far, as of last week, I believe it was, we have almost 485 people who have liked the Legalese page on Facebook. So when you get a chance, just go to the Legalese Please Facebook page and click like, click share. Please share this broadcast, because this is information that I hope all of us can understand and can use. The first official video that I did that discussed George Floyd, that has received approximately 2,100 views, which is awesome. And then when we spoke last week about Breonna Taylor, that video received about 810 views. So continue to share, continue to get the word out, because justice is not a sprint, it is a marathon. It is something that we have to continue to pursue. And it is not just a destination, it is a method and means in order for us to make sure that we continue to speak truth to power. So thank you so much for that. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get into it, all right? Today's lesson, if you will, is about the legal case that told Black people you ain't shit. All right. Now, let me give you a disclaimer. If you have little ones sitting around, and if you curse around them, then they will feel at home. But if you are like me and you try to be use the discernment or discretion when using colorful words and language, then you probably want to take your little ones and have them watch Sesame Street or something like that, because I will probably be cussing. And I want to give that notice because, as I told a couple of people this week, all of the women in me are tired. We're traumatized. We are tired. We are exhausted. We are weary. We are angry. We still have joy, and we are willing to fight. And so when you have all of those women bottled up in one woman, I don't really know who's going to show up. So what I do is I bring all the women to every space that I'm in. And somewhere in the spectrum of womanhood is a cusser. All right. I am a proficient and prolific cusser because I do not believe that profanity is the language of those who cannot express themselves. I am an English major, and I am an attorney, and I am a professor, and I don't use profanity. I cuss. There's a difference. All right. So the colloquialism when we were coming up is that when you talk to different people and they would be, going in almost like the dirty dozens, where you be like, your mama's this and your mama's that. And someone would say something and then you would respond, or someone would respond and they said, child, you ain't shit. Now, you didn't really necessarily believe them, but that was almost like a punctuation to the end of you getting that last insult in. When you couldn't think of another your mama joke or another dozens response, you would end with something like, you ain't shit. Well, when we talk about tonight's legal case, we are talking about something more than people just playing the dozens, people just trading insults and jabs. We are talking about a legal case that has set the trajectory for what you see today in our society. This legal case is something that you would not believe a jurist or judges who sit on the highest court of the land, which is the United States Supreme Court. You would think that there will be some type of objectivity or some type of leaning into the facts or trying to engage in ethical or moral behavior. However, this is the case that sets it off, where you had white men, all white men, determine that Black folk ain't shit. All right. And we'll talk about why that is more than just a feeling, why that is just more than an emotion. All right. So I am going to share my screen, and I hope and pray that you all can see what I see, because I have a PowerPoint for you, because that's how much I care about you. All right. So let's see. Here we go. All right. I hope you can see. Hope you can see it. All right. So let me look at Facebook real quick and see if you all can see it. Okay, because I can look on my video. So technically I'm watching myself. So please put in the comments if you can see. That's not what I'm looking at. That's not what I want to see. I want to see me live. Okay, put in the comments if you can see me sharing this screen. Okay, I see some hearts, so it looks like you can. All right, so I am going to go to this right here. Remember, I told you I'm doing it without seeing anything on Facebook, but I'm just going to go ahead and roll with it, and then I'll come back. So tonight's lesson, if you will, is talking about the legal case that told Black folks you ain't shit, and it is presented by me. All right, so let's get into it. I got to scroll down. Come on. All right, so these are the objectives for tonight. There are 3 objectives. There might be more, but these are the ones that I am starting with. Let me put on my glasses so I can see. All right. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. The first objective is to identify a landmark legal case that arguably, in my opinion, legalizes and weaponizes systematic oppression and racism against Blacks in the United States. That's objective number one. Objective number two is to trace the effects of this case to two additional landmark cases. And three, to recognize how the ramifications of this case can be seen in today's law and policies carried out and executed by the highest office in the land. So those are our three objectives: identify, trace, and recognize. All right, so in order to go forward, we need to go back. In order to go forward, we need to go back. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. When I was working for the public defender's office, I felt an urge or calling to go back to school and to get another degree so that I can teach in college. And the degree initially that I was going to get, I didn't want to do criminal justice because I already had my law degree. So I decided I was going to get a master's of arts in English. All right. And then that would be able to allow me to teach English on the collegiate level, because as I told you earlier, my major in college was English. So I wanted to get a master's of arts in English so that I could be a professor in English. And then ultimately I can teach a class about law and literature. So I went to Chicago State University. There it is where I obtained and received and earned my master's of arts in English. While I was a graduate student there, I would work in the morning at the public defender's office. Shout out to all of my friends in Markham that would read all of my papers and make different edits and then allow me to leave the courthouse so that I could attend my classes. You know who you are. So while I was a graduate student at Chicago State University, there was a paper that I wanted to write. And in this paper, I wanted to quote Dr. William Augustus Jones. Who is William Augustus Jones? I'm glad you asked. He was a very notable African-American minister and a civil rights activist. And when I was a little girl, I would attend along with my sisters Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. And every so often, especially in February, they would have a speaker series or a lecture series. And this lecture series would be people that would come and talk about their works. And they would give lectures, and it would be free of charge. Anyone could attend. You could be a member, you could be a visitor, and we would sit in the sanctuary and listen to these lectures. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized all of the scholarship that I was surrounded by, because we had lectures from Dr. Naeem Akbar, who's a famous African-American psychologist. We had lectures from Dr. Asa Hilliard. We had lectures from just, you name it, that person came in and lectured. And so one of those persons that came in was Dr. William Augustus Jones. I remember this when I was a little girl, and he wrote in 1976, 1979, one of those years, he wrote a book called God in the Ghetto. And in this book, he talks about how people see each other is a reflection of how they see God. All right. I remember that from a little girl. I'm talking about 7, 8, 9 years old. So fast forward to me being a master's student. I knew that I did not have this book, God in the Ghetto, but I did know someone who did. And that person is the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr., who is my dad all day long, as well as mentor, joke teller, you name it. And so I contacted Dr. Wright. I call him Dad. I contacted Dad and I said, hey, can I get this book out of you? Because I know you have it and I need to be able to cite correctly what Dr. Jones says. And for those of you who know Dr. Wright, you know that he is also a person who is a master of language. And in short, he told me I couldn't have the book. And so I needed this book to finish this paper. And so I said to him, well, Dad, what if I quote you quoting Dr. William Augustus Jones? And he told me I could. So in this paper, I quoted dad quoting Dr. William Augustus Jones. Now, do I know what this master's paper is? Absolutely not. But I know that this quote that I am going to share with you comes by way of Dr. Susan Williams Smith, who is another scholar and journalist and person who I love and adore, and who I grew up under her tutelage while also at Trinity. And so she wrote a book which is called The Book of Jeremiah, The Life and Ministry of Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. by Dr. Susan Williams Smith. Now, I only want you to listen and to pay attention to the quote, because the quote is summarized in this passage, okay? To the left is Dr. William Augustus Jones, who is the writer of God in the Ghetto. And to the right is a summary of what it is that he said. And this sets the framework for this conversation. Quote, Dr. Jones in his book, God in the Ghetto, argues quite accurately that one's theology, how I see God, determines one's anthropology, how I see humans, and one's anthropology then determines one's sociology, how I order my society. So I'll say it again. Dr. Jones in his book, God in the Ghetto, argues quite accurately that one's theology, how I see God, determine one's anthropology, how I see humans, and one's anthropology then determines one's sociology, how I order my society. All right. So for tonight, for the purposes of the discussion, I argue and expand the definition of God as representing a deity, a religion, school of thought, collections of ideals, beliefs, etc., anything or anyone a person worships or idolizes. So for the purposes of this discussion, God does not have to be a deity that lives in the big sky. God can be those who are allegiant to, we call it white supremacy, white patriarchy, colonization, capitalism. All of these can be gods, because how I see God, whatever it is that I worship or whatever it is that I hold allegiance to, is how I see you, how I see humans in the world. And then how I see humans is then how I order my society. So if I believe my God is a white, male, patriarchal being, or if my God is someone who holds allegiance to patriarchal, colonist, racist beliefs, then I order my humans how I see other people based on that concept. So then my hierarchy is those who ascribe to or align with whiteness, with maleness, with patriarchy, with colonialism, with capitalism, with all of the isms, with racism, with classism. And so then I then order my society based upon those beliefs, based upon my God. Okay? So this sets the framework, in my opinion, what I would argue, as to why the law is one of those things that people would worship. Because if you had jurists that were saying that this law denotes or connotes or whatever the terminology is, because now I forgot it. If this law is giving an opinion, and the opinion is you must do this, this, and this. If I believe that the power of God lies in the law, then I am going to follow the law. Let me give you an example. An example is, I have argued for many years, and I also argue to my students in my class, that laws follow morality. So if you want to know the trajectory of a law, then you look at the morals that put that law into place. Think about, for example, prohibition. Okay, prohibition is a law that spanned a number of years, and the number of years said that you were not supposed to buy or consume or sell alcohol, because morally at the time, consuming alcohol was morally wrong. Okay, and your body was a temple. So anybody who did it on the low was called a bootlegger. Well, over time, the morals about alcohol and the consumption of it changed. So as the morals changed, then the law changed. Okay, I'll tiptoe into the 21st century. Think about the consumption of marijuana, about how you still have Black and brown persons doing double and triple the time for very low quantities of marijuana, because at the time when we were talking about war on drugs, marijuana may not necessarily have rose to the level of cocaine, but there was a knowledge that you had Black and brown persons who were using marijuana. And so police officers in general would arrest these persons, and then they would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and then they would be in custody, whereas their white counterparts would not receive the same outcome. Well, when morals change, then the law changed. So the morals is now, maybe I can make a lot of money if I open dispensaries, or maybe I can engage in trying to put into place my capitalistic belief. And so what I'm going to do is, instead of crucifying those who use marijuana, I am going to now open the playing field, open the marketplace for them to buy it from me. And then I become rich. Okay. So now the law is you can use marijuana, but you have to use it in a particular context. Do you see what I'm saying? Morals, once morals change, laws change. All right. So when we are talking about this case, and we're talking about, as I see God, anything that I deify as God, that then determines how I see my brothers and sisters. And when I say brothers and sisters, I really mean men and women. So if I prefer my God, if I see my God as white or male or supremacist, then I am going to see my interactions with people as I prefer, or I put in a hierarchy, white, male, supremacist, and then that is how I align my society. Okay, so I hope we're all on board with that. So these are the morals which went into the law. And the case that we are talking about, we'll get to in a minute. So what are the ramifications of what Dr. William Augustus Jones said? The ramifications of what he said is this. This is a picture of Elmina Castle in Ghana, West Africa. And I think it was 2007, I went on a sojourn with my church at the time and with Dr. Wright. And when we arrived there, this is a castle that housed enslaved Africans. And this was, in many instances, the final stop before there would be the transatlantic slave trade, which is also called the Maafa. And so in Elmina Castle, which is in Ghana, this was a castle that was built by the Portuguese. And in the Portuguese would come to these castles and they would start to dehumanize Africans and enslave them. They would lay them down in dirt. They would try to take away their language. They would try to take away their worth, and they would physically incapacitate them before placing them on these boats that would take this journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, what you are looking at, the building inside the castle, that is a church or a chapel, okay? And there is a church and chapel. When I went in there and I saw it, I could not believe it, because you have the dehumanization of millions of African peoples who were kings, who were queens, who were engineers, who were lawyers, who were chiefs, who were queens, who were chemists. Just they ran the gamut of intellectualism and Black excellence. And when they were reduced to just property, you have a church built in the middle of all of this dehumanization. Well, the reason why Dr. William Augustus Jones' comment is so appropriate is because when you build a church inside of a castle, what at least I infer from that is you don't give a shit about people who look different than you. people who have different racial origins than you. You don't care. And you don't see any conflict with worshiping God, your God, and then coming out of the castle and engaging in the Ma'afa. You have no problem worshiping a God and then coming out of a church and then continue to engage in the dehumanization of Africans. And the reason persons don't have a problem with that, the traders, their families, officers that were in that castle, is because their God, whatever they worshiped, was honoring and putting in a hierarchy white male supremacy, white male patriarchy, white male colonialism, white male capitalism. So there was no difference between going into church and singing the great songs of Zion and then coming out and treating Africans like shit and have them literally laying in their shit because they didn't see them as humans, because in their hierarchy, Blacks and Africans were not even in their hierarchy, they were property. So when you have this mentality that is on the bench, on the highest bar of the land, the highest court of the land, the United States Supreme Court, you have this case. You have heard of this case, probably, but for some of those who have not, here you go. The legal case that I argue starts the trajectory of the belief of Black people, you ain't shit, is Scott versus Sanford. All right. There is the United States Supreme Court citation, 60 U.S. 393. This decision was reached in 1856. And what was this case about? This case was about Dred Scott. Dred Scott was enslaved in the state of Missouri. And then I'm giving this a big summary. I'm truncating it. I'm making it real small. If you want to know all of the details, you have every right to go and look this case up. Dred Scott then went from Missouri to Illinois. Then he went from Illinois, where he had lived for 10 years, to Louisiana. And then he went from Louisiana back to Missouri. And so Dred Scott had attempted many times to try and either buy his freedom or articulate that he was free because he had spent a majority of time in free states or free territories. And so with the help of abolitionists and other people who believed in his position, he tried to sue. And in his suing, he said that he should be set free and that he should be given that remedy because, why not? If he had resided in these lands that were free, why could he not be considered a free person? All right. And so he went to court, he lost, he went to court, he lost again. He then had his case end up in the United States Supreme Court of 1856. And so at that time, you had the Chief Justice, who was Roger Taney, give as part of an opinion or his decision. These are some of the quotes. Now, for the United States Supreme Court, there are 9 justices. The justices are judges. And so what you have is you can have a situation where they can unanimously give a ruling, or they could be, deadlocked, or they could give a majority opinion. In this situation of Scott versus Sanford, they gave a 7-2 majority opinion. And the opinion was written by Justice Roger Taney, okay? And he wrote as the Chief Justice on the highest court and the Supreme Court, and also as a slave owner, quote, "And it becomes therefore our duty to decide whether the facts stated in the plea are or are not sufficient to show that the plaintiff," that would be Dred Scott, "is not entitled to sue it as a citizen in the court of the United States," which is code for you have about as much right, Mrs. Scott, in suing suing for your freedom as my chair has in trying to be recognized as a citizen in the United States. This is certainly a very serious question, and one that now for the first time has been brought for decision before this court. But it is brought here by those who have a right to bring it, and it is our duty to meet it and decide it. The question is simply this: can a Negro whose ancestors were imported into this country and sold as slaves become a member of the political community formed and brought into existence by the Constitution of the United States, and as such become entitled to all the rights and privileges and immunities guaranteed by that instrument to the citizen, one of which rights is the privilege of suing in the court of the United States in the cases specified in the Constitution? You already know this is going the hell downhill. And you know this because you use words like imported. You do not import people, you import things, you import goods. So Justice Taney is already showing his hand in terms of how he is going to rule for Dred Scott or for Sanford, who was the person who tried to enslave him. Justice Taney goes on to say, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, all white men, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed," end quote. The general words, this is still Justice Taney talking, the general words above quoted would seem to embrace the whole human family, and if they were used in a similar instrument at this day, would be so understood. But it is too clear for dispute that the enslaved African race were not intended to be included and formed no part of the people who framed and adopted this declaration. So in short, this is Roger B. Taney right here. He is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and is also the slave owner. He says, one, you don't, talking about Dred Scott, you don't have a leg to stand on because you cannot bring a lawsuit in federal court or any court because you are not considered to be a person. He went on to say that Africans in America, whether you were enslaved or whether you were free, you have no rights whatsoever to even come in this courtroom, in this space, and try and assert any rights, because clearly the Declaration of Independence does not talk about you. When it says all men are created equal, we are talking all white men, not black men, because you're not men, you are property. And the problem is that if this was just Justice Taney's opinion, then he could believe it and we can go on about our business. But the problem is that when he puts his opinion into writing and the writing becomes law, the law is now legalizing and weaponizing oppression. And so now, where can you get respite? Where can you get reform? Where can you get protection when you have the highest court in the land telling you that you ain't shit, that you don't matter, that you don't have a leg to stand on? Okay, so I want to show for you this clip on Melissa Harris Perry's show. She used to have a show on MSNBC. And I want you to watch this because she goes into a little bit more detail on this matter, okay? And I hope you can hear it.
In the past decade alone, January 24th, 2004, Timothy Stansberry, Brooklyn, New York, unarmed. November 25th, 2006, Sean Bell, Queens, New York, unarmed. January 1, 2009, Oscar Grant, Oakland, California, unarmed. January 29th, 2010, Aaron Campbell, Portland, Oregon, unarmed. July 18th, 2011, Alonzo Ashley, Denver, Colorado, unarmed. March 7th, 2012, Wendell Allen, New Orleans, Louisiana, unarmed. September 14th, 2013, Jonathan Farrell, Charlotte, North Carolina, unarmed. July 17th, 2014, Eric Garner, Staten Island, New York, unarmed. August 9th, 2014, Michael Brown, Ferguson, Missouri, unarmed. In the past decade alone, these men and hundreds of others have lost their lives to police. Local police report to the FBI killing at least 400 people a year. From 2006 to 2012, a white police officer killed a black person at least twice a week in this country. Which brings us back to Ferguson, Missouri, where, according to a report in the Daily Beast, in 2009, police officers charged a man for property damage because he bled on their uniforms while they arrested him and allegedly beat him bloody. Ferguson, Missouri, where it took 6 days to release the name of an officer who shot an unarmed teenager to death. Ferguson, Missouri, where police released images of someone who might be Michael Brown involved in a store robbery, and then hours later said the robbery had nothing to do with why Michael Brown was stopped by the police officer who killed him. Ferguson is just outside St. Louis, Missouri, the place where, as historian Blair Kelly reminded us this week in The Root, Dred Scott sued for his freedom on the grounds that he and his wife had for many years lived in a free state. His case eventually went to the Supreme Court, and in 1857, Chief Justice Roger Taney declared that Scott had no right to sue because, as a black man, he was never intended to be an American. Speaking on the clause in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, Taney wrote, quote, "It is too clear for dispute that the enslaved African race were not intended to be included and formed no part of the people who framed and adopted this declaration." And he went on to say that black men had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect.
The white man has no rights. The black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. Now, again, if this was any type of opinion, if this was someone just trading in the dozens and saying, you don't have any rights, you ain't shit, that would be a completely different outcome. But when you have the law telling you that in the country you reside, you are not a citizen and you do not have equal protection of the law, where do you go to get assistance? Where do you go for help? If you are mistreated, where do you go? Because clearly his opinion is in line and step with the morals of the country, which now becomes the law of the country. So Dred Scott remained enslaved until the person who was his quote unquote master emancipated him or provided emancipation to him a couple years later. Okay, so we have Justice Taney saying in this Supreme Court case, you ain't shit. I have a better chance of getting rights and protection with my dining room chair than I do with an African American. All right. So now we then go to the legalized oppression continuing. We have the next case, Plessy versus Ferguson. This is a citation which you can look up. It's 163 U.S. 537. This is a case that happened in 1896. In short, you had oppression and segregation that was occurring all across the country, at least in the South, although I would argue that the Northerners was doing some shit too, okay? But in the South, in Louisiana, you had railroad cars, and railroad cars were set based upon your race. You had the all whites car and you had the all blacks car. Well, Homer Plessy, who is the petitioner in this case, meaning he is the person who is petitioning, who is asking the courts to not only hear his case, but to rule for his side, because an earlier opinion had ruled against him, and he still wanted to get some type of legal outcome that benefited him. He was involved with several activists in Louisiana, and they wanted to test the Louisiana segregation laws that said, if you are a Black person and you are on a whites only car, you can be arrested, criminally charged, prosecuted, and sentenced to jail. And Homer Plessy, who was an African-American man. Now, there are some reports that say he was 7/8 Caucasian, but then there are other reports that say if you only have a little bit of drop of Blackness in you, you are Black, okay? So Homer Plessy, he says, I want to be the person, I want to be the spokesperson for trying to right this wrong and making sure that Blacks can ride wherever it is that they want without any type of criminal prosecution or civil liability. So he got on the whites only car, he was arrested, and then he sued, and his case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And John Ferguson was the respondent. In Plessy versus Ferguson, they considered the case of Dred Scott, okay? And Dred Scott, of course, remember, the holding was what? You ain't shit if you're a Black person. So in this case, 1896, the United States Supreme Court says in a 7-1 opinion, which means 7 people said, this is what we want. One person said, I dissent or I disagree, and then one person abstained, okay? The ruling created what is called the separate but equal doctrine. And in this ruling, the court said that separate does not imply inferior. The state law, which created the separation, did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Why is this important? Because the 14th Amendment speaks about due process, and it speaks about the states being able to give and afford protection to all of its citizens. The Fifth Amendment is a due process clause, but it talks about the federal government. But the 14th Amendment is the amendment that talks about equal protection as it relates to the states. And so equal protection, I have described it, I was looking for my shawl, but I can't find it. It would be equal protection of the law is if I have a shawl, okay, and I am nice and warm and there is nothing from the elements that can harm me, I am not being beaten up by the wind or leaves or anything like that. And then you come and sit next to me and you are cold and you are beaten up by the elements and you don't have anything to block nature from raining on you or from the wind blowing you. And so you come up to me and you say, hey, Natasha, can I use your shawl? And I say, hell no. And you say, well, why not? Because you're thinking maybe it's because I don't know you, you don't know me. Maybe it's because I have a thing about talking to strangers. And my response is, no, I'm not going to share my shawl with you because you ain't shit. You are Black, you are ugly. You know that you're going to steal everything that's around me. You can't read, you're not smart, you're stupid, you're violent. You really descend from the monkeys. And so you're not a person. Why would that would be like me wrapping my shawl around a chair. Why would I share my shawl with you? In this metaphor, the shawl is the law. And in Plessy versus Ferguson, there were a couple things that happened. The law is saying that even though you are deserving of a shawl, you're not going to get equal protection. Okay, because one, we don't even think of you all as citizens. And then secondly, well, if you know you want a couple of things to be able to function in this society, okay, we'll give it to you. And so just keep it separate. Just segregate it. Okay, so you can get some water, but you don't have clean water. Come on in here, Flint, Michigan. You can get housing, but you may not get adequate housing. Come on in here, projects. You may want to vote, well, you might want to vote, but we're not going to let you vote. Okay? Which is still happening as recent as a few days ago. Come on in here, Atlanta, who was standing outside citizens for hours upon hours trying to cast one vote. So as long as you keep it separate, I mean, you know, it's equal. You can have water, it doesn't have to be clean water. You can have a house, but it doesn't have to be a sturdy house. You can have education, but it's not like you need up-to-date books or curriculum. Because I mean, you're Black people. Why would we want to invest in your success? You're nothing to us. Okay? You are property. You are less than. You are you've been, as Dred Scott case said, you've been imported. Okay, you could possibly want the same things that we whites want. And think about, again, Dr. William Augustus Jones, how I see God, how I see something I worship, then determines how I interact with those around me. And then it then determines how I create my society. So Plessy versus Ferguson is not only are we going to provide some things to you, but it's going to be separate but equal. And you still not getting any protection by the law. Okay, big problem. So finally, desegregation, yay. Okay, 1954. You would think that when Brown versus Board of Education comes out, finally, we have a court case that advocates for the equal protection and for the integration of Blacks with whites. Okay, hold on to that. First of all, did you know that there were 2 Brown versus Board of Educations? Okay, so we talk about the 1954 case. Very rarely do we talk about the 1955 case. So let me break it down for you. Okay, so in Brown versus Board of Education, you have a class action lawsuit where you have a number of plaintiffs who are suing and saying, look, we're tired of this shit. We're tired of this separate but equal nonsense. We're tired of broken down houses. We're tired of broken down public facilities. We're tired of the fact that when we go into a theater, we got to sit in the balcony and then the whites get to sit on the main floor. We're tired of the fact that when we go into church, we got to sit in the balcony and the whites got to sit on the main floor. We're tired of the fact that when we go onto buses, even though in 21st century, the back is where it's at this particular time, you had to go to the back because that's what the law said. We're tired of walking past the rope or the sign that says all Blacks got to go to the back of the bus and whites are in the front. We're tired of the fact that when we go to get a drink of water, that there is a sign that says for whites only, for Blacks only. And if we try to do one thing over another, then what'll happen is we could lose our everyday ability to walk around and be free because we're sitting in somebody's jail. Okay. And I would argue, even though it's not necessarily related to this, that today is anniversary of Loving versus Virginia. You have people saying we're tired of people criminalizing the right of me to love who I want to love. Okay. And so in 1954, the Supreme Court, which was headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, they reviewed as a court all of the allegations from the petitioners, which were Brown and a whole bunch of other school children and family. And then they reviewed the position of the Board of Education for Topeka, Kansas. But it wasn't just Kansas, it was Wisconsin. I think it was one of the Carolinas. It was other states involved in this lawsuit. And so they reviewed Plessy versus Ferguson, and they said that Plessy versus Ferguson denied class action by plaintiffs legal relief as case law. They held that racially segregated public facilities were legal as long as they were equally provided. That's what Plessy versus Ferguson held. As long as we provide it to you, as long as we keep it separate, then it's legal. Well, Chief Justice wrote a unanimous opinion. That means all 9 justices at the time agreed with what he said, which is that separate but equal was unconstitutional. That's what Brown won. That's what we call Brown 1, said separate but equal was unconstitutional. Yay, yay, this is great. This is great. This is great. And then people are like, well, what the hell that mean? So then the Supreme Court had to come back a year later, and they provided the following, which is summarized in OYEZ, which is a great legal source online, OYEZ. Anytime you want to look up Supreme Court cases, this particular website is good for giving summaries. This summary says, quote, after its decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, which is called Brown 1, which declared racial discrimination in public education unconstitutional, the court convened to issue the directives which would help to implement its newly announced constitutional principle. The cases stemmed from many different regions of the United States with distinctive conditions and problems. So what that means is in Brown 1 in 1954, the court said, stop this shit, okay? You gotta, y'all, this is not what we're doing right now. This ain't that, okay? We are done with Dred Scott versus Sanford. We are done with Plessy versus Ferguson. We are now establishing a new legal precedent. And that new legal precedent is separate but equal is unconstitutional. Now, why is that challenging? That's challenging because you have the federal level, the highest court in the land, telling the states what to do. Well, how the hell are we gonna do that shit? Said the states. Because you have the North who is saying, okay, well, we believe in equality and all that type of stuff. And then you have the South saying, fuck that. You can't be coming in here and telling us how to run our business. And you can't be telling us that we need to treat these animals like citizens. So in 1955, the court said, okay, y'all want to follow us? You want to follow our ruling? Okay, desegregate. You have to desegregate everything. Public facilities, all these things, parks, buses, stores, sit-in counters, restaurants, movies, churches. You got to desegregate all of that. Okay, so now you can have integration. But now you need to go through this process, quote, with all deliberate speed, end quote. All deliberate speed. What does all deliberate speed mean? You can take as long as you need to because we are the federal government, okay? And according to the doctrine of federalism, there are some times where the federal government cannot go and tell the states, this is what you need to do, because the states operate independently of the federal government. There are times when they act together and there are times when they operate apart. And so the federal government was saying, you know, it's kind of like your grandmama coming in from out of town and coming to your house and telling all the kids, y'all need to clean up y'all room. And you're like, okay, well, how should we clean up our room? And your grandmom says, I don't know, I don't live here. Y'all just need to go ahead and clean up your room. And then you're like, what the fuck? How am I supposed to clean up my room? What are the procedures? What does a clean room look like? And your grandmama says, I gotta go. I don't live here. I just know y'all need to clean that up. That's what this ruling was saying. This ruling was saying, you gotta clean some shit up in the South and in some places in the North, but mostly in the South. And so the states are saying, well, how do we do that? And the federal court says, with all deliberate speed, which means that it may be very fast for those that agree that their room should be clean. But if you like, this is just who I am, and you're just gonna have to get to know me, you can't tell me what to do. I'm gonna move like the speed of a turtle, okay? So that is why you had desegregation in the South taking its long ass time, because with all deliberate speed, it is so subjective. And if you have a political or legal system where you are benefiting in the subjugation of citizens of the United States who are Africans in the diaspora, you are going to make sure you are going to protect those systems by all intents and purposes, okay? So what does that look like in 2020 or in the 21st century? I'm glad you asked. Now, you got to know I'm only putting this face up to make a point, all right? I want you to listen to what the commander-in-chief has to say about following the law. Where'd he go? Okay.
And when you see these towns and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over. Like, don't hit their head and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head. I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
All right, let me run that back because I need you to see something, why this is a problem. All right. This is probably when I'm going to cuss the most, but I'm going to try and be respectful. This motherfucker is standing behind a podium. And the podium says, President of the United States, which we know is the highest executive leader in all the land. But particularly for the United States, the head executive. And you remember from government, when you were in 8th grade and when you were in high school, that there are 3 branches of the federal government. You have the legislative, which is the group, the legislators who make the laws. Then you have the judicial branch, which is the United States Supreme Court. So let me go back. The 3 branches of the federal government. The legislative branch is called Congress because Congress has 2 houses. The houses are a House of Representatives, which is based on population, and the Senate, which is based upon trying to have fairness. So every state, regardless of its population, has 2 senators. Okay, it's called bicameral, which means 2 houses. That is Congress. That is the legislative branch of the federal government. Then you have the judicial branch of the government, which is the United States Supreme Court. Then you have the executive branch of the United States, which is the President of the United States. And you remember from United States government and from Schoolhouse Rock that there are times where there needs to be checks and balances. So one house or one branch cannot be telling the other house or branch what to do. You can't have too much power. You have to have separation of powers and things of that nature. With this particular individual is standing behind a podium, the President of the United States. He is standing in front of the police officers from New York. Now, this particular individual used to be a private citizen of the state of New York. If you remember, this is the same motherfucker that took out a whole ad in a paper and said that the exonerated 5, which were previously called the Central Park 5, that they should be killed on sight. He took out an ad for that newspaper. Okay, so now he is the President of the United States, and he is telling the state level of the executive branch that he, the federal branch of the executive, federal level of the executive branch, that it is okay to mistreat people who are suspects by not being too nice. Why is that a problem? That is a problem because, one, this person is creating policy because he's not speaking as a private citizen. He is speaking as the President of the United States. He is making policy as he opens his mouth, and he is basically given an edict or an executive order from the federal level to the state level that you can treat these people, suspects, any way you want them, any way you want to, rather. The reason why that is a problem is because it's in this country that the Constitution of the United States that doesn't recognize Black people, but says that if you are to be charged with a criminal offense, you are to be what? Presumed innocent. So even if they are a suspect, it's this country's Constitution that says they are presumed to be innocent. And when you add on to the fact that when you have a number of Black and brown persons being arrested, you have this person saying that you are to treat presumed innocent suspects as if they are guilty of crimes, and you can knock their head around if you want to. This is the same New York Police Department who you saw kill Eric Garner, Amadou Diallo, and a number of other people, and now you are giving them free, like a free check to just continue to do what they want to do without the confines of the law. That is morality following legality, because the morals of this person is Black people, you ain't shit. And he uses and weaponizes the law to enforce his morality or lack thereof. This is why you have people jumping up and protesting and engaging in, I don't call it riots, engaging in uprising, and how you have people saying, you know what? To hell with these stores, to hell with these businesses, because it is still in this country, according to many people, that property is presumed to be more important than persons. This is why people are upset. This is why people are going around and trying to get their voices heard. This is why you have such an outrage where you see an officer with his knee and his whole body weight on someone who is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Because in that officer's mind, in the president's mind, how they see their God, what they worship, what they hold true to, is how they see other people, and then it is how they determine their society. They don't think of people who are kissed by nature's son as citizens, as human, as deserving of equal protection. So, this is why it is so important to look back at cases and to see what the cases say, what they don't say, and how these cases from as far back as 1857 to 1896 to 1954 to 1955, how they have a trajectory and a connection to how we are operating in the year of our Lord, 2020. So, I say all that to say, we need to be wise about what's going on around us. We don't have to be lawyers. We don't have to be professors. We don't have to be politicians for us to be invested in our outcome. Now, we do not have to have a pulpit or a platform in an arena in order for us to speak truth to power. Your presence on this earth is your option of deciding, are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? We cannot rest on our laurels and say, oh, I didn't know. Oh, I didn't. It's too late for that shit. You have an obligation to know. You have an obligation to know. And I have an obligation as one of many to provide not just the knowledge, but the access for that knowledge so you understand what you have to do now. Now, you may not be the justice of the Supreme Court, but you can cast a vote. You may not be the president of the United States, but you can read through a list of judges and decide who is advocating for you. You don't have to have a law degree, but you can speak truth to power in looking at these policies and speaking on different egregious actions that may serve as microaggressions when someone says something or does something that is offensive, not just to you as a person, but to as your race, as to your society. And no, you do not have to be Black to be offended. When I put on Facebook that I was going to be talking about the legal case that said Black people ain't shit, I said in my description that if you are more incensed by the terminology that I use than the fact that there are Black lives that are being killed, they're being snuffed out, they are being hunted down, then you are part of a problem that you may not recognize or attribute. I had a conversation with one of the daycare moms, and I don't particularly care for her, but on this particular day, she saw me and Grace, and she didn't say hello. She just started talking, and she said, "Did you see?" Because she knows I work downtown. "Did you see what happened downtown with all of that looting and stuff?" And I just stood there like, okay, I have two options. I can ignore her, or I could answer her question. And while I was deciding, she said, "It's despicable, all that damage that was done downtown. It just makes me sick to my stomach." Now, I have associates and friends who had their businesses broken into and their property destroyed and their inventory taken. So I'm not speaking to that. But what I wanted to say to her, and I knew if I said it, I was going to be mad and Grace was going to be hot because I would have left my baby in the car without any air. I wanted to say to her, and I pose this to you: were you just as sick to your stomach when you saw a man laying on the ground, pleading for his life, pleading for his breath, pleading for his mother who had already crossed over into the ancestral realm? Are you just as aggrieved when you have young people who are playing outside, and because of the misreport of a 911 dispatcher, the police officer rolls up on the person and shoots a 12-year-old without having any questions asked? That's Tamir Rice. Were you just as aggrieved and just as angry when you heard the roll call, if you will, of African-American men and women who have been gunned down in their homes while they're sleeping, while they're jogging, while they're shopping? We won't even get into the fact that you have Breonna Taylor's murderers still walking the street. We won't even get into the fact that when we say Black Lives Matter, do we really mean all Black lives? Because the lives of those who are Black and trans, Black queer, they are being killed one by one. And where we are very boisterous in our position about some things, we're quiet as shit about other things. We do not want to be the people that say that whoever or whatever we worship, it now influences how we look at people. We need to be able to expand what it is that we are talking about when we're saying equal protection. And it's more than I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper. It's I am my brother, I am my sister. And the law is just one way of making sure that we are all equally protected, because that's our birthright. And we should not have to get our worth or our merit from judges or from law. We should be able to hold each other accountable and do it in a way that matters. Is racism still going to exist? Is it going to just all of a sudden disappear? My argument is probably not. I would love for racism to be abolished. But it is not just an action thing or a mindset thing, it is a heart thing. Okay? And so we need to make sure that we are empowered with the law and with knowledge about the law so we can share it and try and move this pendulum that goes back and forth on, well, I'll just do this because I feel like I'm forced. We need to be able to be mindful about the law, to be able to share what we know about the law with other people, and make sure that the law is equitable and it has access to others so that we are all protected. Okay, so with that, I am going to just quickly go on Facebook on my phone and see if there are any questions, because like I told you, I am on Zoom, so I'm kind of blind. So I don't know if you all have said anything, but I'm sure finna check and make sure. Feel free that you are sharing this video, and understand that the views and expressions of me are me. That's why it's on my page. And if you really want to get in any type of discussion, or you want to get resources on where should you start, just inbox me on Legalese, please. You can also, and I'll put this in the Facebook chat. My email is legaleaseplease@gmail.com. Okay. Also, if you want to be a financial blessing, because I've had people say, well, put your information on the chat and all that type of stuff. This is not something that I always feel comfortable in doing. However, if you want to contribute, because this does take money in trying to get subscriptions and technology and equipment, you can subscribe to my PayPal or my Zelle, because it's the same. And I would be greatly appreciative. There are those who have already been investors, and I have said thank you to them. You know who you are. Make sure that you just continue to be a blessing to others by sharing not just information, but sharing knowledge. This is why I created Legalese. It's because I don't want there to be a barrier between what is legal and what is legally written and what is mentally understood. Okay. So with that, let's see, I started at 8:30. I'm just a little over my time, and it's now 9:50. Let me see if I have any questions. I don't see any questions. So what I'm going to do is, I made this video public. I will keep it on my personal page as well as my Legalese Please page. And then I'm also going to upload it to YouTube. So feel free to subscribe, feel free to invest, feel free to share, because it really is about the Ubuntu mentality, which is I am because we are because I am. And so we can only fight this good fight together if we believe that we matter. Okay? All right. So with that, I bid you adieu to you and you and you. We are not going to be meeting next week, but we will probably be meeting the last week in June. And at that time, we are going to take a look at cases that involve Black trans persons and Black queer persons. And we're going to be investigating, why are these murders, why are these crimes not being solved? Okay, so you all have a great evening. My love to you all. Make sure that you rest, get some water, take a walk, just hold on to your joy, because no one's going to give it to you. And unless you decide to, no one can take it away. All right, take care, be blessed. I'll see you all. Bye.